Did you know you're running a human algorithm? An algorithm runs based on the rules it was given. It runs in the background. You don't see it working. It learns from what it's been fed and keeps producing the same kind of results. The more it's fed, the more it reinforces itself and it serves whoever wrote it, not whoever it's running on. That algorithm is man-made. Someone created that path for you, and unconsciously, you've been feeding the system. For years, I didn't realize I was stuck. My doing great was actually a mask for how much I was struggling because I didn't know my great was feeding the algorithm and the system was running me. I didn't have the words for it. I just knew something felt off, but I couldn't name what it was or what was happening. Even knowing what had happened to me, my mother never sat me down and said how to navigate it, mostly because she didn't know how herself, but she encouraged me with books. I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. What I Know for Sure. Women Who Run with the Wolves. The Colour Purple. On the surface, they were just stories, but underneath, they all did the same thing. They named the glitch. They gave me the words for the parts of me I'd been told to keep quiet. They showed me that you don't just survive the system, you have to learn how to rewrite it. Dr. Maya, Oprah, Clarissa, and Miss Alice Walker, these women became something like aunties to me, keeping me on track when I didn't even know I'd gone off. None of them knew me, they still don't, but somehow they did. And thinking about it now, this was my mother showing me how to navigate my life. And then there was the Bible, which didn't give me just rules, it gave me truth about who I actually am underneath everything that had happened to me. All of it quietly pointing at a life I could live, not the life I was surviving, the one waiting on the other side of all this. But here's the other thing I was carrying alongside all of that, the truth I wanted to believe, and the gap between the truth and the one I'd been handed, because all wounds heal. That's biology, right? That's what wounds do. So why did everything around me seem built on the assumption that this one never would? How long could I go on treading water before the exhaustion took over and I gave up? For me, it did. Overworking, insomnia, an eating disorder, needing to drink, different ways of covering it up, controlling it, ignoring it. The exhaustion had to go somewhere. And what I know now, all of that was the algorithm running in the background, exactly as it was designed. Nobody handed me the manual. Nobody told me I could rewrite it. And that's what this episode is about. Greetings. This is Like Me Officially podcast. I'm JK, and this is where raw truths meet reflection, where I challenge social narratives, explore self-advocacy, and move beyond surviving life-changing experiences into courage, self-insurance, and thriving. Because if you're anything like me, you'll recognize that life is for living and living freely. Hashtag our time to thrive. Before I go any further, a quick note. I will be talking about child sexual abuse and sexual violence. No explicit details will be shared in this episode. And this episode is not intended to judge, criticize, or minimize anyone else's lived experience, but rather to give my lived perspective on something complex that too many people have to live through. If anything shared feels heavy, please step away and come back when you're ready, because you matter more than this episode. I think about the algorithm in terms of when I'm on a different social platform. For example, I'll be scrolling through my feed and suddenly everything feels different. The layout has shifted even slightly. The things being pushed to the top of my screen aren't actually the things I want to see. That's the algorithm. It's a man made system built by developers I've never met, making decisions about what I should look at. I never agreed to those changes. I just found myself living inside them. And then I have to go on another learning curve to understand how I need to use the updated platform. Thinking about that, it just clicked for me. I realized the similarities of those platform algorithms to human algorithms. I looked at the system that was running underneath my own identity and realized it was invented. It was installed in my life without my consent. And the moment that realization came through, I realized it could be reinvented. If someone else wrote the code for my life, I decided they didn't get to own the machine forever. So I've come to see 3 stages to how this system ran in my own life. Stage 1, victim. Stage 2, survivor. Stage 3, thriver. Grooming is discreet. It's easily missed if you're not looking for it. And most people aren't, because why would you be looking for something you don't know exists yet? It doesn't come with a warning sign, a hazard label. It comes as care, as attention, as something that feels at the time the opposite of harm. That's what makes it effective. And that's what made it so hard for me to name later. The book, The Body Keeps the Score, helped me understand that my body was holding all of that long before my mind could process it. The score was being kept somewhere I couldn't read yet. And in this stage, the algorithm was written for me. Looking back, the before was the grooming. It was the prep work done to make sure the system would take. And during and after, that continued grooming was what kept the code running. I was officially labelled a victim when I reported child sexual abuse. This was years after living through 10 plus years of abuse, and the label felt odd to me. Mainly because my image of a victim came from a commercial on TV, and I just didn't relate to that. Because I didn't fit the image, the negative update to my systems became the cause of my extensive trauma. I started reading the books of those with lived experience or books from experts to make sense of it. They helped me see that the abuse was a design meant to keep me trapped, but my survival was the proof that the design was failing. It was the signal that I was stronger than the code, and now I'm the one who gets to rewrite the design. There's an assumption that victim to survivor is a straight line, a natural next step, like the word survivor is waiting for you on the other side of the experience. That wasn't my experience. Mine started the other way around. I was called a survivor long before anyone called me a victim. A victim is defined as a person who has been harmed as a result of a crime or action. It's still the most widely used word within the police, the court system, and in law to describe individuals, people who have experienced sexual abuse or violence. I was named a victim the moment I reported to the police. Years after the abuse had happened, years after my body had already been keeping the score. And that's not unusual. Research shows that around 72% of adults who experience sexual abuse as a child didn't tell anyone at the time. For many, disclosure comes years, sometimes decades later, and studies suggest the average delay can range from 7 to over 20 years, depending on gender, safety, shame, fear, and whether the person had support around them. The victim stage, for me, came in a roundabout way via a system that chooses language that better serves its own processes than the person living inside them. The term victim is used by the police, like I said, and legal authorities to signify that an individual has been harmed. It's seen as a vital aspect of how the criminal justice system operates. It's a legal clarification, a procedural necessity. It places you, me, the victim, as a witness to a crime rather than a person with a life. And it can come years after the experience, given to you cold, without context, and without care. This period was the most shaming time of my life. It was so heavy, so isolating. Questions coming from every direction, and relatives who had heard about the situation trying to convince my mother to tell me to withdraw my accusation, to walk away, to make it easier for everyone else. And then the person I reported was found not guilty. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuine helplessness. I stopped speaking publicly. I stopped writing. The only thing I could do was exist. I didn't see the point of doing much. That's what the system did to the algorithm. It issued an update I didn't agree with, and in a moment, my truth, my experience, was considered an error, confirming every whispered lie I'd already been taught to believe about myself. The physical pain, suddenly non existent in the eyes of the law. The lies became so loud, and in a flash, mentally, I became the little girl holding her breath and hiding under the bed. The smell of the carpet, a scent that followed me for months afterwards. The book, The Body Keeps the Score, calls this a somatic flashback. The body doesn't remember trauma the way the mind does. It stores it as fragments, a smell, a sound, a physical sensation. And when something triggers it, you don't think about the past. You're returned to it completely without warning. The self-blame that followed wasn't weakness. It was the algorithm doing exactly what it was designed to do, running the code that had been written long before I ever walked into a police station. And did you know an estimated 3.1 million people in England and Wales experienced sexual abuse before the age of 16? The delayed reporting, the disbelief, the self-blame, the silence after the system fails you. That's not personal failure. That's a pattern. And patterns, once you see them, can be interrupted. The move from victim to survivor didn't come from the system. It couldn't. The system had already shown me what it thought of my truth. It came from somewhere else entirely. The shift from survivor towards thriver wasn't something I chose on a particular day either. It just happened. Between the whispers and the burnout, I was signed off work for several weeks, and it was during that time, that quiet, forced stillness, that I knew something had to change, that I needed to embrace a change. In the book, Waking the Tiger, trauma is spoken about as an incomplete cycle, the body waiting to finish something it started. That forced stillness, looking back, I think that was my body finally finishing something. The real shift started with a gentle but firm whisper. It felt like my mum looking me dead in my eye and telling me to fix up, reminding me that I wasn't the only person in the world with personal challenges. It was the prompt I needed. It was a question or questions I needed to hear. How long will you stay here? Aren't you tired from threading water? And the permission that followed, it's okay to swim to the shore. And slowly, something started building that I didn't have a name for yet. There's so many things I didn't have names for. Researchers, researchers call it self-efficacy, which is the belief that you have something to do with how your life goes. Not that you control everything, but that you're not just a passenger in it either. That's the difference between hope and agency. Hope says things might get better. Self-efficacy says, I have a hand in this. Moving from this stage started by me recognizing I didn't want to free fall downwards anymore. I could feel myself wanting more for myself. The transition started with that knowing, then doing small things that began to stabilize my sense of sinking, and slowly I started to float. Then I started doing the things that would keep me afloat, aka survive, and choosing not to let the system that called my truth an error as I regained my own power. Then language came. People told me now that I'm a survivor. But I realized again quite quickly it wasn't my language. I didn't actually understand what I had survived yet. When they looked at me, I saw sympathy, but I also saw a flicker of disgust and discomfort. The sympathy, I didn't get that. But the flicker stuck because I didn't know I mattered. I was like a sponge absorbing whatever names other people used for my situation. It felt like I was being re traumatized every single time someone labeled me. I would imagine myself in the sea, looking up at the sky, just threading water. I chose to be as calm as possible because I knew that if I panicked, I'll drown. And drowning happens quickly when you panic. So I learned how to tread water. And I want to be honest about why I stayed there as long as I did. I always have and still do question why the word survivor is used for those with lived experience of sexual violence, because its secondary intent, its origin was for Holocaust survivors who reclaimed that word with full intention. That shift was powerful and purposeful, and I honour that. And then cancer survivors elevated from a place of pride and resilience. For those with lived experience of violence and abuse, survivor is handed to us differently, presented as an identity, a permanent one, fixed, with sympathy, diverted eyes, a moment of discomfort, sometimes blame, sometimes shame. It's not a criticism, it's just an observation, and it just is. But it's not a just is I could easily accept. What the survivor stage did give me, I didn't have to explain myself, which is exactly everything when you don't want to explain anything. It meant being believed, finally. After years of having my own truth questioned, the label said, this happened. You're not imagining it. That validation is hard to walk away from. And underneath all of that, the exhaustion of threading water had become familiar. Familiar isn't the same as comfortable, but it's known, and known feels safer than stepping into something you can't see yet. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this, the cumulative cost of chronic stress on the body, allostatic load. The nervous system learns to run on survival mode. And even when the threat is gone, the system keeps running because that's what it knows. The thread in water wasn't weakness, it was my nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do. And there were benefits to staying in that water. But there was also another side. I was letting someone else direct my thinking. I was becoming passive in my own life. I was exhausted because I was running two systems at once, the one they gave me and the truth I wanted to believe. The shift for me from survivor toward thriver wasn't something I chose on a particular day, it just happened. Between the whispers and the burnout. The burnout that had me signed off work for several weeks. And it was during that time, that quiet, forced stillness, that I knew something had to change, that I needed to embrace the change. In the book Walking the Tiger, Peter Levine talks about trauma as an incomplete cycle. The body waiting to finish something it started, that forced stillness. Looking back, I think that was my body finally finishing something. The real shift started with a gentle but firm whisper. It felt like my mother looking me dead in my eye and telling me to fix up. Reminded me that I wasn't the only person in the world with personal challenges. It was the prompts I needed, the questions I needed. How long will you stay here? Aren't you tired from threading water? And the permission that came afterwards. It's okay to swim to the shore. And slowly, something started building that I didn't have a name for at the time, another thing I couldn't name. But researchers call it self-efficacy, the belief that you have something to do with how your life goes. Not that you control everything, but that you're not a passenger in it either. That's the difference between hope and agency. Hope says things might get better. Self-efficacy says, I have a hand in that. That was the shore right there. And this is where I finally started rewriting the algorithm. Before this, the language gap was immense. Being told to thrive felt like being left to roller skate when it was the first time I'd ever put on skates. But stage 3, the thriver stage, is where I found my own words. For me, this isn't a performance. I no longer need to defend my truth. I own it. It's an actual settled peace. I've moved into a total acceptance of what is and what was. No questions, no judgment, no self-condemnation anymore. I realize now that survival gave me a false sense of security that was so thick, I can't even recall all the details of it. Why was I holding on for so long? I always see the survival stage as being a pit stop, and pit stops are places you're meant to stay for a while, not a lifetime. I stayed so long I was practically given squatters' rights. I choose me now. I choose not to survive to make others comfortable. I choose to put my own gas mask on first. Life is exciting because I've started to breathe more easily. It's a struggle sometimes. It's like when I go to see my mum, I still feel that urge to flop myself down in a chair and revert back to being a teenager. And that's what that struggle is. It's going back to the familiar and leaning into it. But I'm learning not to give myself permission to show up from that default place anymore, where I'm given the chance I will rebuild. The truth I wanted to believe isn't a hope or a gap anymore. It's just something I know. I don't have instructions for anyone today. I just have a question. What if the loops you've been stuck in isn't your fault? What if that algorithm was actually running exactly as it was designed by someone else's truth about you? And if it was designed, what if you could recode your future? Think about it like this. You have a laptop with different software and apps to support what you do. Most have to be downloaded and installed, right? Well, if it can be installed, it can be uninstalled. And you have the ability to uninstall that program. If that program is frustrating you, slowing you down, and infringing on your ability to function to your highest version of you, maybe it's time to consider uninstalling it, not unless you want to update it. Uninstalling doesn't mean you ignore cleaning up the spilt milk or the cracked bowls left behind. And what I mean by this is that you lived a life before the uninstallation, and there may be things you need to clean up and loops you may need to close. And by the cracked bowls, there is a Japanese tradition called kintsukai, where they repair broken pottery of gold. The idea is that that piece is more beautiful for having been broken. And if grace allows, you can rebuild your pieces with gold. That's the great thing about uninstalling the software. Once you put it in the trash and hit delete, you free up space. You finally have the capacity to embrace a new version of you. What was invented about you can be reinvented by you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Like Me Podcast. If anything I've shared has made you stop, think, or see yourself just a little bit clearer, fantastic. I love this for you. I love this for me. And honestly, I love this for us. And if this episode shifted something in you, give yourself a moment to sit with it. And if anything felt a little bit too heavy, speak to someone you trust. What I've learnt is that we don't heal in isolation, and you don't have to carry any of this alone. This space isn't about staying in survival mode. It's about lifting ourselves out of the dimension that has tried to keep us trapped, and choosing a version of ourselves that's still becoming. If this resonates with you, share with someone who might need a reminder or a friend. And make sure you're following the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. I'm JK. Stay open, stay self-curious, and remember, it's our time to thrive.